They call it D-Day, the day when HSC students find out if all the work has paid off. For 4,050 students in the Hunter region, this piece of paper can determine what path they follow in life, or in some cases, how they feel for the rest of the day. The average mark in the state out of 500 is a tertiary entrance score of 262, but the best students in the Hunter region scored a lot higher than that. Behind Christopher Muffet's score of 481 is Timothy Gorst of Jesmond High with a mark of 478, with Elizabeth Pepper of Newcastle High on 477. Only 12 marks separate the top 10 students in the region. Not only did Christopher Muffet top the region overall, but he also topped the state in 3-unit engineering, while Lindell Hooker was first in 3-unit English and Cheryl Noble first in agriculture. Rachel Hutchison scored the best mark in ancient history.
For many shop owners in the Hamilton area, the last 2 weeks have meant financial disaster.
Con, what's happening to your business now?
Well, at this point in time, Peter, there's no business at all. It's completely closed and I don't know when we're going to open up again.
Trying to decipher when and if they can reopen, the business people met with government experts to coordinate disaster relief. Until now, government low-interest loans have been designed for flood damage up to the figure of $25,000. It was announced today that figure has been more than trebled to rebuild businesses affected by the quake.
The government, in view of the circumstances, has raised that limit to $80,000. It is repayable over a term of up to 10 years and at a very concessional interest rate of 6%.
The Hamilton Chamber of Commerce estimates only 30% of small businesses in the area are fully covered by insurance. Chamber Secretary Ross Taggart says these new loans could be the saviour of Hamilton business.
Hamilton is small business based. If they don't get assistance from either the government or associated bodies, they will definitely go broke.
Rick Parrish once headed one of Australia's foremost search and rescue squads. The pararescue team based locally at Williamtown was trained to parachute into any terrain and carry out emergency paramedic care. The team was specifically used for sea search and rescue. But with the demise of the Victorian division of the National Safety Council, the pararescue team was disbanded.
We had dedicated full-time professional staff who spent 7 days a week on standby, 24 hours. And we could train, we could go out and parachute or go down the winch wire in a helicopter to almost any situation. That now isn't available.
Now if a boat is in trouble at sea, life-saving operations such as the Westpac Rescue helicopter are called on. But the helicopter has limitations. The aircraft can travel only 20 miles out to sea. If a boat is further out than that, there's not much anyone can do. Alternatively, Sea Safety can carry out the search with light aircraft, but most planes, with the exception of military craft, are not fitted with a homing device and therefore cannot pick up a vital EPIRB signal from a stricken vessel. Rick believes the current search in Bass Strait for the missing yacht Great Expectations is an unfortunate example of Australia's inadequate rescue operations.
There's no National Safety Council. There are no specialised teams of search and rescue, for want of a better word, experts. And if, like I said before, if someone does find something, one of the small aircraft does find something, for example, a person in the water, if they throw a life raft out, well, that's great, but then what? If it's outside of helicopter range, helicopters have certain limitations, and that's taken into account if there's a helicopter available to go out. The small aircraft that are searching, if the people in the back of the aircraft aren't trained or haven't been trained for some time, it's limiting the chances of ever finding anybody, really.
The irony is, though, that while a scaled-down search for Great Expectations continues, 35 highly trained men like Rick Parrish sit at home unemployed. Jodie McKay for NBN News.
The quake hit at mid-morning, flattening dozens of buildings. igniting gas fires at a huge steel plant.
That was what the world heard of BHP's earthquake damage. But what was taken for a major fire turned out to be a deliberate burn-off to reduce the risk of serious damage to the coke ovens. Today, the ovens are operating as normal, as is most of the plant. On the day of the quake, steel production resumed within 12 hours, but it was 5 days before full production was reached. Most plant damage was caused by the lack of power immediately after the quake. The last time such a total power failure took place at BHP was 15 years ago. Lessons were learned then, leading to the development of the plant's automatic shutdown systems. Now management recognises there are lessons to be learnt again.
The difficulty we had is we had a total blackout and was to get the plant started, because we do need some power to run the pumps to pump water around the coke ovens and the blast furnaces. So I suppose the lesson is how to start the plant from a completely blacked out position.
BHP lost 25,000 tonnes of raw steel production. Others lost more liquid assets in the earthquake aftermath. The production line of Coca-Cola bottlers at Broadmeadow was shut down for 8 days, following extensive damage to the factory and warehouse. Those 8 days meant a lost 1.6 million litres of Coca-Cola, at a time when the weather dictates a peak demand for soft drinks.
We're back in full production, all distribution is working, but as I said, we've got limited warehouse space, and we're just battling with it as we from a day-to-day basis.
Sixteen-footers have long been regarded as the fastest class of weekend sailcraft. The sport has grown in popularity over recent years, and the backing of sponsors has enabled many crews to become professional and even more competitive. So competitive that entry in the Sprint Series is by invitation only. Among the local boats to get a start will be Beechwood and Castrain Homes. The course will be less than 1 kilometre long and will be set out in front of the Sailing Club, providing a spectacular viewing arena for spectators. 4 boats in each heat will battle it out over 2 days for a bite of the $7,000 prize money.
I would regard it as the Formula One of skiff sailing, actually. It's skiff sailing on a short course, which provides much excitement as far as a spectator point of view, and much excitement as far as crews are concerned with regards to the sailing, in as much that they're sailing very fast over short courses, which makes it very hard on the crews and the skippers together.
The state government wants motorists to swap roads for rail. Upon production of a driver's licence today, passengers were given a free ride on off-peak services in the City Rail network. The idea is to attract new customers to a system currently running with a 30% occupancy rate. Rail authorities hope drivers will be more inclined to take the train after today's promotion. City Rail says the one-off event is part of an aggressive marketing plan to attract more off-peak business. And for many regular train travellers, today's offer was an unexpected bonus.
Demolition hold-up is a farce. The owners now face an indefinite wait, which could run into weeks, until an expert can be found to inspect the site.
I think it's a whole load of coswallop, I really do. And I think that the good Dr. Turner has only verified this in his statements a minute ago to all of us about the truthfulness or the honesty or the historical significance, if you like, of the stones.
The discovery sparked an intensive search of scrub surrounding the site, which was between an abandoned highway running parallel to the Pacific Highway about 6 kilometres south of Karua. Police believe the body had been lying undiscovered for 3 weeks. It's now known the deceased was a teenage male, but a cause of death can only be established through detailed forensic tests in Sydney. In the meantime, homicide detectives are treating the case as highly suspicious. They're going through missing persons files looking for someone matching the deceased. There was no clothing near the body. All police have to identify the victim is a man's Canon wristwatch.
News of the cuts was met with disbelief when a group of local residents studied state rail ticket sale figures from 1983 through to 1989.
According to State Rail's ticket sales figures has doubled. If you take into account the fact that there are fewer stations being manned now than there were before, there's probably no doubt that patronage has more than doubled since 1983.
The Hunter Transport Improvement Association says the figures were taken over a 1-month period, showing an overall increase of 92% over the 6 years. Stations marked to be closed include Blackhall's Park, Toronto, Adamstown, Katara, Cockle Creek. Teralba and Burrigal stations also planned for closure had numbers up by 75 and 56%. State Rail Newcastle manager John Zantiotis said the statistics are misleading. He agreed patronage was up, but says services were also up by 87%. Government figures show only 10% of seats on the Newcastle to Fassifern line, where the brunt of the cuts will occur, are filled each day.
That we're trying to tailor our services to meet community demand, not run services that's full of fresh air.
According to State Rail, Newcastle suburban train services lose $17 million each year. A final decision on closures will be made in July.
Hilda was en route to a reunion with her mate Harvey at an English zoo when she escaped. The trailer truck she was travelling in jackknifed on a highway west of London. 3-ton Hilda grazed and slept by the roadside until a team of experts sedated her. A man driving behind the trailer couldn't believe his eyes when he saw Hilda crash to the road.
Well, all I seen, I went to go out to see the drivers and that was all right. And that thing come out the back.
What did you think?
I'll get back in my lorry.
Equipment usually reserved for lifting heavy commercial vehicles was called in, and it took more than an hour to lift the 10-year-old hippopotamus into another trailer. However, Hilda died soon after. Experts say the stress of the accident, the trauma of being drugged before being hauled into another trailer, proved too much for her.
Broadmeadow's predominantly elderly community has maintained a brave front in the weeks following the earthquake. Like their neighbours in Hamilton, they've lost access to shops, banks and basic services. Landmarks like the Century Theatre and Broadway Hotel were among the early earthquake casualties. The local squash courts and the top floor of the Premier Hotel are destined to follow. In all, council engineers have inspected 160 damaged buildings in the suburb.
Probably one of the biggest things that happened in Broadmeadow was the Century Theatre coming down. Everybody relates Broadmeadow to the Century Theatre. They've lost their landmark, they're worried about losing their town, they're worried about losing their identity.
Broadmeadow newsagent Ross Brogden realised many locals were unclear on how to work through the maze of repairs, welfare and insurance problems, so he organised a meeting to clear up the confusion. The Lord Mayor joined a string of speakers. Insurance experts urged people to take extra security precautions with damaged buildings, while Terry Maudsley of the Builders Workers Union warned of bogus operators out to fleece the unsuspecting homeowner.
Old people, they'd have trouble, they've got to go to Adamstown to get their pension, they'll have a lot of trouble. To even find the bus stops at present is hard.
Those who remember say Broadmeadow was once the hub of Newcastle. In the wake of the earthquake, there's concern that Broadmeadow has no chance of ever regaining its glory.
Everything was alive, but look at it now, dead as dead. And it's been dead for a while, really.
The hub of Newcastle once, but now
it's nothing, absolutely nothing.
Thanks, mate. The game started 45 minutes late as a good crowd edged into the ISC after a day at work. The Russian torpedoes looked fresh only 10 hours after a long flight from Singapore. But out in the paddock, the Soviet club side, which has been 3 times champion of Russia, was kept in check by northern New South Wales. With the game now only 20 minutes old, the local side has made a series of raids on the Russian keeper. It had been expected to be a Russian walkover, but at this stage the locals seem to have out-torpedoed the tourists. Back to you in the studio. The Russian torpedoes had been expected to run all over northern New South Wales, but still jet-lagged after a long flight from Singapore, the tourists were kept scoreless in the first half. But the professionalism of the torpedoes eventually shone through. 2 quick goals gave the tourists a good win before they meet the Socceroos on Friday. The Russians in the green strip showed no signs of a long flight from Singapore, holding out to a barrage of early shots at goal. The northern New South Wales Lions, while showing some creativity, didn't have the finishing touches to outwit keeper Sarachev. But it wasn't until the second half that the torpedoes started to fire. Just minutes after the break, Grezhnev stabbed at a ball in close, which skidded off Ralph Meyer into the back of the net. From here, the Moscow side, which has been 3 times champion of Russia, took control. They ran a series of passing movements, often making a break to the net. With just minutes to go, substitute Gitchilov netted the final goal. The Russians will play the Socceroos tomorrow in Sydney.
As soon as the day after the quake hit Newcastle, the hordes of sightseers began flocking towards the devastated areas, keen to see just what the damage looked like. For police manning roadblocks, it was a full-time job just keeping them away. And just hours after Hamilton's crumbling Beaumont Street was open to the public, Newcastle City Council officials were forced to close it again due to unexpected hordes of onlookers. Ever since the CBD's been reopened, a steady crowd of sightseers have been present at the gates of the Newcastle Workers Club site, drinking in the ruins. And according to Christopher Henry, Regional Manager of the Insurance Council of Australia, it's only the beginning.
Newcastle will have people coming in to see the quake, to see the damage. It is a unique event. And I would imagine the motels, the hotels, the shops and the businesses will be getting income as a consequence of a tourist boom as people come to see what an earthquake looks like.
But while Newcastle may be able to look forward to a tourist boom, it still has plenty of problems to take care of first. Much of the city's rebirth now depends on the payout of insurance claims. Mr Henry says the final tally will surpass $600 million, with officers being manned around the clock to process claims. But while Mr Henry says the system is coping with the demands, he says there's a very real danger of claimants becoming impatient, leading to rash action.
There's 23,000 claims. Some people are going to find themselves at the top of the list and some will find themselves further down the list. But the people of Newcastle who've been affected by the quake should understand that the insurance companies are working round the clock to process the claims. It would be unwise to move too hastily into repairing the building until the structural engineers are quite sure that that building is not going to sustain any further damage.
For major insurers like the GIO, it's already been a costly process. Today, amidst the ruins that were once the Newcastle RSL club in King Street, Regional Manager George Quintrell handed over a cheque for $1.8 million to the club's Secretary-Manager Phil Winnie.
Well, I understand at this stage they're looking at the possibility of rebuilding on the site, but I do think as they look at a bit more, they might finish up going into commercial development and probably just leasing back part of it, sort of thing.
But while the club has had its fair share of misfortune as a result of the quake, it seems management has at least something to be thankful for. Phil Winnie says if it hadn't been for an 11th hour update of the policy, the road to recovery would have been much tougher.
We sat down with the GIO representatives. Thanks to them, they brought the fact to my notice that the building was substantially underinsured, and we did virtually double the policy last July.
With the cost of a high-tech flight simulator costing about $14 million, a Hunter consortium produced the NovaSim FT1 flight trainer, which sells for the relatively bargain price of $140,000. The Cessnock Air Training Academy, Newcastle University and Newcastle engineering firm Spangat developed the FT1 to help train pilots to fly single and twin-engine planes as well as the Boeing 747s. The group prefers to call the NovaSim FT1 a flight trainer rather than simulator because its booth is static. Its major role is to familiarise pilots with instruments, prepare them for solo flying in all emergency and weather conditions, and enable them to take off and land at all of Australia's East Coast airports. Cessnock's Air Training Academy has bought 6 flight trainers, another was recently sold to Queensland and 2 to New Zealand. Qantas has been substituting an FT1 for much of the time normally spent by pilots on its $14 million simulator, saving them millions in capital investment costs. For the private or small commercial pilot, the FT1 can significantly cut down the amount of time needed to spend in the air before they can fly solo.
We found in a study that we carried out that the average time to first solo for students who had not trained on the FT1 was approximately 13 hours. For students who had trained on the FT1, the average time was about 7 hours in the aircraft and about 4.5 hours in the trainer. So the reduction in time is about 40%.
Last year was a big one for the 26-year-old from Kulnura as he climbed the world's boxing ladder. In January, Guy grabbed his first crown by knocking out Pele Teatio in the first round to win the Australasian light heavyweight title. 4 months later, he outfought Willie Featherston to win the Commonwealth light heavyweight crown by a unanimous points decision. Guy Waters didn't have time to dwell on his achievements as he was back into the ring against Ray Skeldon. He gained a points decision over the tough Skeldon in his first title defence. A worthy finalist, Guy Waters. Sam Stewart has been one of the catalysts for the meteoric rise of the Newcastle Knights. Sam, along with his family, has made the Still City home. Last year, Sam not only led the Knights with distinction and flair, but gained representative honours for his native New Zealand. Sam toured England and France, playing in all 5 tests, and against Australia earlier in the year, Sam won the player of the match in the second and third tests and was named player of the series. Sam has now played 16 consecutive tests for his country, a fine achievement indeed.